Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades Fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollak, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and construction expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living it. Real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades Fire and the rebuild effort. I'm Joel Pollak, and I'm here with Oren Ezra and Ron Goldschmidt, and we have a very special guest this evening as well. Jennifer Gray Thompson is here with us, and she is from the organization After the Fire, and we're going to be talking to her about everything she's learned in the course of working to help fire victims in her own community and in many others. But we'll start with some news, and some very good news from Pacific Palisades today. The Palisades Garden Cafe opened this week, and people are sending all kinds of pictures from one of their favorite haunts on De La Cruz. Is that the street it's on? It's right opposite where the village school, I guess, used to be since that burned down. But it's open, and people are having fun. A couple of places have opened in the Palisades, so that's very good. And a friend sent me a really brilliant article about another great piece of news from the Palisades. You may be familiar with the children's theater program that is called Theater Palisades Youth, and it runs at the theater on Temescal, which is the Pearson Playhouse, which burned down, unfortunately. That whole side of Temescal really was hit very hard. But the kids and the teachers and the directors and the art design people, the set people, everybody stuck with the program, and they had a 2-week run of the musical Crazy for You. So that was held, I think, in the Revere Auditorium at Paul Revere Middle School. So they're keeping it together. People are doing everything they can to keep the community going, and whether you can be in Palisades or not, that is something that everybody can be very happy about. And I was in the Palisades earlier today with my friend Andrew Hires, who's a biologist at USC, and we went into Temescal Canyon. You're not really supposed to. It says do not enter in a big red sign, but I've been going in to check out wildlife and to see the changes in the canyon, and so I thought I'd take a biologist with me, also someone who's just very smart and understands a lot about the trails and about the fire. So we went in, and we went deeper into the canyon than I've ever been before, way past the waterfall to the source of the canyon. And I'll show you a couple of clips here. We went as far as we could along the creek that flows in the canyon until it basically disappeared. So right now the water in the creek is coming out of springs and is flowing underground essentially. Let's show that first video if we can. This is just what it looks like up there, and you can see the devastation. Everything is burned. This is the basin, basically, where the Temescal Creek starts that eventually flows all the way down through Temescal Canyon. And you see that ridge line on the top. That's the Backbone Trail. If you've ever hiked part of it or taken a mountain bike up there, that's roughly where that is. And then let's show the next video. This is a view from slightly higher up. We managed to climb up one of the mountainsides to get up to the Backbone Trail. And this, again, is the view. You see a little bit of green there. Some of the trees actually did rather well, and they're putting out their spring buds. So that's very exciting. And then on top of one of the mountain peaks, we hiked several of them. On top of one of them, we found a box where people write notes in a book that's kept inside the box, little notes about what day it was when they got to the top and leaving messages for each other and so forth. And it's a little bit sad, but I thought I'd show you this video of Andrew opening the box on top of one of the mountains. Let's show that third video.
Well, there's the book. This is your safety deposit. suppose.
Very sad, but some signs of life. So that's my report on the state of the Palisades today.
You mentioned, Joel, that the Playhouse had their run despite everything. That's great. I think that's super important to keep these kind of things going. To have the cafe reopen is great. One of the things that I feel is standing in the way is the kind of the lack of consistency getting in and out of the area for residents, as far as like, the PCH. So I have moved to, kind of west the Pepperdine area and shuttle back and forth to Santa Monica through PCH. And I find that the consistency on the roadblocks leaves much to be improved. And I've heard the same thing from a lot of folks. Sometimes they check your pass, sometimes they don't check your pass, sometimes they ask you for your license. There's usually a big line of cars, and I feel like this is one of those areas that we can really improve a lot on with technology, efficiency. Get like a license plate scanner would do wonders here. That we could just like let certain vehicles through if they've already been checked before, because in the morning it takes an hour and a half to get to Santa Monica and the west side from Malibu, and that's just like a deal breaker if you're going to stay here long term and you have kids to take to school. And it's one of the things that I think people are considering. So it's one of those, it sounds like a silly thing, but it's not. We've got to like fix these things, and we're 2 months past it. I feel like the Army Corps is doing overall a good job, but they also tend to have very consistent staffing. So somebody new comes in, they man the checkpoints. They might not necessarily know the drill or the area, and so you get kind of like randomized process. And I think it would do wonders if we could just have a very clear and efficient way to get in and out, especially for residents. That would help a long way. The other thing I wanted to bring up is I met a couple people over the weekend, which brought to light kind of like the plight of apartment owners in this disaster. I think we talk a lot of times about like the homes and people are insured, insurance policies and such, but a lot of the apartment owners are really, in some ways, have the worst of it because their structures are still standing. They're usually in the middle of a bad fire zone, but their insurance companies are asking them to go back to their apartment buildings. Moreover, when I spoke to a treasurer of a 36 unit building over the weekend. She said that the Army Corps has basically indicated that they're not the first priority for cleanup. And so they're faced also like with being deprioritized on the cleanup. And in addition, they're faced with a financial hit because their apartments and units were not typically, they're not a total losses, so they're not like covered very heavily on insurance, but also they're getting hit with permitting fees per apartment. So for this particular apartment building, the number she quoted was they're a 36 unit apartment building. They're going to ask to re-permit 36 apartment units at a total cost of about $1 million for the permitting. And that's just the reserves that the condo does not have. And many of the apartment owners are on fixed income. They don't have that either. So I just wanted to bring that up. I don't really have any solutions for it. And I hate to bring up issues I don't have solutions for. But it's one of those things that I feel like should be highlighted. We need to talk about it on future episodes and bring it up as we can come up with solutions. And that's my rant for the week.
Okay, so guess what I'm going to start with? Debris, our favorite.
You always have to start with debris.
It's like.
But you don't end if you're not going to end with debris.
No, we're starting with debris. Let's see where we're going to end. But after our previous episode with Lindsay Hovert, I got to talk to Aaron, the person that is in charge in Lindsay's office. He's in charge of as I understand, a lot of the reconstruction. And he came back to me and he explained me what's the situation. Why do contractors need hazard license? Which I kind of understand now. I understand that like if you have GCA and hazards license, you can remove the debris. But if you have GCB, which is a lower level of or different level of construction with hazard license, you cannot remove the debris. And if you have, which something I don't understand still, if you have C12 and C21 and OSHA, that's what you do day in, day out. You're not a general contractor. All you do is like take down houses. You still cannot remove debris with a hazards license. So I'm still like in touch with them. I'm trying to get answers about this one. But something very interesting that came up through the conversation, and what I think is that like LA County would really want to help us, especially in Sunset Mesa, because Sunset Mesa I think is the biggest pocket of LA County that is not connected to Malibu or LA City. And I think that the LA County would really like to help us rebuild. And we were talking about like all sort of new like ways to build. Me and Ron have been searching through it in the last like couple of months. And you know, when you build, you want to make sure that you build a passive home that not only protect you from fires if they come, but also save a lot of energy. I think that like we talked about it a lot about the cost of building. Cost of building I think will be crazy expensive. We're hearing anywhere between like $700 square foot to $1,500 square foot to rebuild. Now most of people don't have this money on their insurance, so I don't know how they're going to rebuild. But there is like some new very interesting things. We're talking to one factory that what they do factory building homes, and a lot of people have the assumption that it's the same like prefab, but it's not. It's something totally different. It just like it means that they're building your house inside a factory in a higher quality materials in a very efficient way, and then they just like assemble it on premises. But it's still Title 24. It's not Title 25 to ever know the difference. So it's not considered to be like a prefab home. And over there you can probably get to like way numbers that are like under the $500. There's another startup that we've seen that is doing something very nice. They basically put all your plans, they create all your plans in a 3D model, and after that they're using AI to create bill of materials for the contractor. So basically when the contractor is coming to build, it's like regular like normal construction, but when the contractor is coming to build, he's getting everything in like boxes, and it's just like Lego. He's putting everything together. They don't need to cut anything on the spot. They don't need to do like none of these things. I don't know, whoever listening to us, I'm sure they went through like even like a bathroom remodeling. You know, you go through a bathroom remodeling, you have 2-3 people coming in, and then they forgot this specific bead that close this screw, and somebody spending like half a day, 2 people sitting outside, and 1 person is going for like an hour or 2-3 hours, whatever, how close you have Home Depot next to you or whatever you need. So this company is helping saving a lot of this cost. They're talking about building 70% quicker. So that's interesting. There is more and more like solutions that are coming up, and I think that in the next episodes, what we'll try to bring like an expert from every different company or every different new way of building, and try to educate ourselves and educate like our listeners more about it.
Yeah, I've already got someone in mind for water. Someone pitched me on a water system, sprinklers on the roof and things like that. So that's a great idea. All right, let's introduce our guest. She's been very patient, and we're very happy to have her here. Jennifer Gray Thompson is the CEO of the nonprofit After the Fire USA. It's a 501c3 charitable organization, and she herself has experience dealing with disasters. She graduated from Dominican University and earned a Master of Public Administration from USC, from the Price School of Public Policy. And then in 2017, after the fires in San Francisco's North Bay, she became the executive director of Rebuild North Bay Foundation, another 501c3. By the way, I think I was in San Francisco around that time. It was pretty terrible.
Terrible.
The smoke and it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then it happened again, I think the next year with the Tubbs fire. Was it the Camp Fire with the smoke coming over to the Bay Area? It was really, really bad. But you remained involved, not just in your own community, but in others. She was named to Forbes over 50 impact list in 2022. By the way, no one would believe that. How do they do an over 50? Anyway, it's just ridiculous. But okay.
I know, I love it. Are you kidding? Women over 50, we are the dream of America.
Well, there you go. It's a great honor. I just don't know, okay, Forbes,
I
good.
didn't pay for it. I didn't even know that I got it until I actually got it. And then they didn't notify me, so a friend texted it to me who saw it in the newspaper.
Well, you've won very many awards, and you've worked with Congress. You've worked as a fierce federal policy advocate. And you helped to secure over $6 billion in direct tax relief for disaster survivors in 2024. I'm sure many people would want to hear about that experience. I have a little bit of insight into what's going on and some of the budgetary things. We can talk about that later if you want. But anyway, we're very glad to have Jennifer here. I met Jennifer when I was meeting with Senator Ben Allen, State Senator Ben Allen, who I actually went to college with. So we've stayed in touch over the years. And he was meeting with her, and she brought a group to Santa Monica, working with Palisades community leaders. She's been at block captain meetings. She's met with faith leaders, clergy, and she remains involved in our community. She's put her life on hold to be here. So we're very glad to have Jennifer with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. And anytime any of you are going through what's on your mind, I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that. Let's talk about that. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Do you have any views on construction cost or on the permitting?
You're going to find I have views on just about every single thing you're going to ask me about, because this is all that I've done full time with my life since October 8th, 2017. So views have been accumulated along the way.
Wait, tell us first about after the fire before we jump into Ron's issue and back into Oren's debris. So let's get
or I'm going to make it more complicated. So, we thought in 2017 we lost 8,900 structures across 4 counties. So we know about the Tubbs fire, but really that was many fires, dozens of fires, all in one night. And in our case, where I live in Sonoma Valley, it was really the Nuns fire that was really more destructive. Most of Santa Rosa burned down the first night. Our biggest damage came like 5 days later. It was like having the fire monster at your back. We had a harrowing 10 days, and we were very much served by a lot of people working very hard, but I'm very proud that so many of our firefighters who were raised in Sonoma actually came home and got on bulldozers and didn't ask permission. They just knew where to put all of the fire lines, and they really saved downtown Sonoma, which is where California was born. So I really didn't like the natural disaster part of it, but I really loved the humanity that I saw at work and at play and how we took care of each other. So I decided I would devote my life to helping my community rebuild. And I left my county job and I took this job, and then I got it after James Lee Witt was the first person that they contracted with. And I said, I've never run FEMA. If you know who that is, he ran FEMA. Anyway, once I had to learn so much, and I had nobody to call that whole first year, and the Camp Fire happened 13 months later, and the Woolsey Fire. So I started helping there and just telling them what we knew, mistakes we'd made, and then starting a community of fire survivors. Now I've stood in, counting yours, 20 communities across 4 states. And about every 18 months, we usually have a horrible fire. We had 3 more megafires in Sonoma County where I live. So in 2021, I changed us from being a local regional nonprofit to officially After the Fire USA. And we have been on the go ever since then. And we're very proud to be in your community. We're very sorry this happened to you, though.
Yeah, it's really incredible that it keeps happening. I mean, when it happened up in Sonoma and then it happened in 2018, these fires seemed far away from the city, frankly. And city people think, well, it's not going to happen to us. We live in a city. I mean, when you're surrounded by other homes in an urban area, you just don't think it's going to happen. Now, in the Palisades, people were aware that it could happen, and we did certain things to try to prepare for the possibility when we moved in. I've mentioned this before, but I called the LA Department of Water and Power to cut the grass on their lot, which is next to my house, because it's either a natural fire break if there's no grass, or a natural fire hazard if there's a lot of grass. So they did that, they cut that. And I have neighbors who, on their own, volunteered to clean up brush in the community and things like that. So people did have some awareness of this, but still, it's such a shock, and it's really troubling that this keeps happening. And some of it is natural. A lot of these fires are caused by people. We still don't know the cause of the Palisades fire. We do have some idea of the Eaton fire. The county sued Southern California Edison last week, and they are blaming the utility and the power lines for starting that blaze. But we just don't know, and it's very frustrating. So it's interesting that we really, I think, Jennifer, we didn't do enough for your community. Just honestly, we really didn't. We didn't take enough input, and we didn't pay enough attention. And you're here helping us. We really appreciate that. But it's sort of sad that it took this for us really to be aware of how widespread, unfortunately, this experience has become.
Well, it's pretty natural. It's pretty normal, though. Like, I don't judge any community that I walk into. I've never walked into one where they were, like, absolutely expected. You know, it is the unexpected. We are human beings. We want to have magical thinking. And, you know, I had never thought about it either. And to be clear, in the Santa Rosa fire and the Tubbs fire, it absolutely went into urban areas that were so far away from the WUI that you had to cross a 6-lane freeway to get there. And it found one empty lot that was overgrown, went around and took out 1,400 homes behind there. So I have this, I always tell people, megafires don't really care about your WUI, and they're going to go where they absolutely want to go, and it's up to us to make sure that houses are not the next point of conflagration. I hate that word. It's just really hard for me to say. But they are preventable. We can have them rarely, but it is absolutely accurate that anytime you're up against a space like you were that's open space, it would be wise when and if you all go back up there, and I think a lot of people are going to go back, to actually train the people who live there and how to do wildland fires. They do it in Lake County. They're doing it in the Marshall Fire in Colorado. There's so many things that we can do, but we have to partner with the agencies and also hold them accountable.
So, Jennifer, you sounded confident that we will build the Palisades again. People certainly want to, but we're encountering all kinds of challenges, financial challenges, all kinds of logistical challenges. What makes you confident that we can do it?
Well, you are, and both sides I see there's a lot of doers. A lot of doers. The Black Captain program, when we brought that, it worked really well in our community, and I've had other communities adapt it, like Paradise, turn it into zone captains. But the amount of dedication to the Palisades is really heartening. I see the same thing in the Eaton fire. If you have that and you can bring the community together and actually work together and share the burden, share the load, because it's hard work to do, then we see as high as 80% of the same people go home. Now, you do see articles about gentrification after wildfire, but what they don't take into account is the houses are more expensive, but usually the same people are back in them. The people we see don't come back are often renters and elderly people. You're just, you're very early in. Sorry. So you have to be a little nice to yourself that you don't have it all under control yet. This is natural.
So you're right, Jennifer. We're early in. It's 2 months since the fire. What are the top 3 things that we should be thinking about right now, from your perspective? We touched on some of them earlier in the call, on the news front, in terms of your interaction with the city, permitting, stuff like that. Like, what have you learned from other fires?
Well, the thing you should all be concentrating on now, first and foremost, is organizing your communities and making sure that filling in the gaps. So if there are neighborhoods that don't have a block captain, you should get those absolutely organized and squared away, because many hands light work. It makes everything better, including when you choose contractors. It can be far less expensive when you're having trouble with your insurance companies, but you can share all of that in a really efficient manner. It's a matter of efficiency. It's not about kumbaya. It's about how do we get you home sooner, less expensive, and you're going to have to be highly insurable. And so all of these things can go in. A lot of things that you are worried about can be mitigated dramatically through having a form of information like the block captains that really flattens the space between policymakers, like the people deciding things about PCH, and funders, and what you want to see happen. And also it makes it so that they come before you. And that's really important. Instead of you one-offing, trying to figure out all the information, the politicians can come before you, the builders can come before you, the funders can come before you, and like what Oren was talking about, it's the other second thing you should do is absolutely start looking into what are new ways of building out there that are much safer. And there's a whole host of companies. There's actually a really great company out of Houston called Nanotech Materials, and they have very cool. They have cool roofs. They have a polymer that they can put in house paint. You can paint your fences in your house. That is, I'm not going to say nothing's fireproof, but very much fire resistant. There's just so many things that you can do, and then find out about while 0 to 5 having nothing around your house, but making it beautiful. You can get home. Those are the two biggest things, and they will actually solve a lot of the other issues.
Now, the building construction materials, all the new stuff, the new technology that's available, does that make construction more expensive? And I guess a follow-up question would be, if they're going to adopt these new codes, like you have to have 5 feet of space between any plant or tree in the house, is that going to hold up rebuilding? Is that going to make it more difficult? There are going to be more permits to get, more inspectors to come around? How does that work?
No, we're really good at this stuff by now, and we started this in 2017. That's not the case at all. Every jurisdiction is going to hire a contractor to actually do fast track for people who have lost their homes or have damage to their homes. You can get your permit in just a few days, if under a few weeks. Even in a place like LA, you can absolutely do that. They're very practiced at this. They know what to do. They do fast track it. Now, when you slow down, or when you see stories about people who are slowed down, like from the Woolsey fire, I don't know what all of the other issues are, but I do know that if you change things around a lot, which most people like to do after a fire, if you add a pool, if you move something to the other side, but if you build on your footprint plus 10%, it should go really quickly. As far as the 0 to 5, that's only within 5 feet of your home. That's not trees 5 foot apart. That just means nothing within 5 feet of your home. And when you go to do your landscaping plan, you just put some kind of hardscape around that area, and the rest is fine. It's really those 5 feet that determine whether or not your house will burn down. There's also your vents. Your vents will be entirely different than they were before. I changed all the vents on my house. It was $5 a vent. It's not that difficult. The one thing I will recommend against, Joel, and you're not going to like to hear this, is sprinklers on your roof.
Mm-hmm. No, tell me about that, because I've seen some of the systems. They look pretty cool. I mean, if you can wet your roof and prevent embers from igniting, why doesn't it work?
So if you put a Class A roof on, then it's highly unlikely that it will ignite anyway. But, so here's the thing. Imagine everyone in the Palisades turns their roof sprinklers on.
This is the same problem with the hydrants, right? You have no water pressure.
You have no water
and no
pressure.
water.
Well, it's even worse with the hydrants, because what happens with the hydrants is as soon as 1 or 2 homes go down, then it destroys the water systems in those homes, and it floods underground and across the street. So whether or not there was water in there, as soon as homes start being destroyed, that's when the water hydrants, the fire hydrants, actually start to lose their own pressure. We've seen other scenarios, like in southern Oregon, the Alameda fire. All the pear farmers on either side of the Rogue Valley turned all of their irrigation on, and then they were trying to fight the fire down in the valley floor in Talent and Phoenix, and there was no water, and they lost 2 towns. So you have to think of water as a shared resource. And if you were out in the woods alone, great. If you have enough room for a water catchment system, might work for that too. That I would recommend if you do have enough room for a very large water catchment system and just you did it. That's the only time. Or if you're out in the woods by yourself.
Well, there was a lot of frustration among homeowners who had pools in their backyard, and they came to their homes that had burned to the ground and thought, well, gee, the water's still all in my pool. And I think some people have pumps that they can use. There's some movement toward saying, hey, let's make sure that the fire department can travel with pumps that they can use to get the water out of the pool.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I think there's an argument to be made of people arming their own pools, because you can just have it turn off when the pool water is out. You can turn it on when you leave, because then you're not actually taking water out of the aquifer. It's not a shared resource. It's your resource. So I could see that being very useful. I have a pool. One of the things that you can also do is have a sign how are they supposed to know who has a pool? Where's the timing for that? It's kind of like people who have metal gates and they think, I'm going to be fine because the fire department has the key to unlock it. And I'm like, you've been through a megafire now. How are they going to unlock all of those gates?
Yeah.
They just can't do it.
they actually, in the few weeks when I was one of the only residents who could get into the Palisades because I had the media access, the fire department was asking me to help them unlock gates. They're like, we don't have the key to this gate. Not like I had it either, but they were asking me because they didn't.
We didn't think about it. We never thought about it before 2017. But then we had horrible stories of people climbing over their gates because everything is de-energized. And we had a lot of people who died in their garages and on the other side of their gates. And we had people who had to leave their, in Lahaina, there was a woman who had to leave her family member and sit down with him and let him know that they actually could not evacuate him because he was physically too large for them to get out. And it was her uncle she'd taken care of for her entire adult life, and she had to leave him behind. Like, these are, we have to think about how are we going to get out of whatever our current situation is. But they never envisioned it in Lahaina like that either, even though they'd had a fire just a few years earlier. We're human beings. We're trying to just live our best lives, and we're not trying to harm ourselves or our neighbors. So I have a lot of grace for these situations.
So Jennifer,
what are some of the things that we should be talking about in terms of construction right now? And you've seen, I think Oren was about to ask the same thing, which is construction, new methods. What have you seen in the last few years that excites you and that we should be thinking about?
I think there's a lot more beautiful, climate resilient, peril resilient housing out there. There's not your traditional stick build that is safer. Now, the more we adopt it, then the price will come down too. So I really like what you were talking about with usually they're like SIPS panels where you can have it constructed offsite and brought in. I really love this company out of Texas called Icon Build. They have the first contract to 3D print on the moon. And they've been doing this all over they have a lot of Department of Defense contracts too. I wasn't excited about 3D printing at first, let me tell you, because every time there was a fire, somebody would send me like an igloo being 3D printed, and I just would say to them, what am I supposed to do with this? Am I going to rebuild a community one igloo at a time? But Icon Build, actually, I started talking to them about 4 years ago. I don't get paid from any of these people, by the way, by design. And I said, would you please think about perils? And they did, and they were really thoughtful about it. Now they have a whole collection on their website where you can also choose your own adventure and design your own home. And you can tell them what perils do you need to worry about, earthquake, tsunamis, whatever it is, and then they can take you through the best science. Now, their prices per square foot are too high for what we need right here. But I am excited that if enough people do adopt it, then we can get to the other side of the cost issues. They just did a 100-unit subdivision outside of Austin, and they have the technology to rebuild multi-story buildings. So we like that. And of course, I like also the thing I like about nanotech materials is that they can actually help homes that have not yet burned down but have wood fences. You can paint all of that. You can do a lot of the things that you want to do. You just have to treat it differently and more regularly. I do agree with a much higher standard because otherwise you guys are not going to be able to You're not going to be able to do it. You can't, an insurance company won't walk into a neighborhood and congratulate Joel and Ron and Oren if everybody else on the block did not do it to that standard, because they have to think of you as a whole.
That's very interesting. So when you look at different fires, you mentioned the Sonoma fire and Paradise Fire, Lahaina Fire, and now our fire. We hear different stories from different places, and we read about them. Sometimes we watch videos about them. There are different stories, and the story we hear about Santa Rosa is that the rebuild was successful. The story about Paradise is that it's working, but the community's different because it's not a forest community anymore. They cleared a lot of the trees that might have been there once upon a time before the fire. And the Lahaina story is they only built a few homes. Nobody knows what's going on. I don't know how accurate these stories about each fire are, but what would you say has happened in each of these places, and what can we learn from them?
So some people measure success by units. I don't. I want to know, did the families get home? I don't want them to be horribly in debt. I don't want them to have, massive crushing, payments on the other side. I would like them to get home next to their neighbors. So all of these fires are very different. In our case, we were pretty much rebuilt in 5 years. A lot of people were home in 2 years. That's the same in the Marshall Fire in Boulder, Colorado. These are very similar outcomes, but they had 1,108 homes. They did rebuild to a higher standard. Very engaged community, very organized community. That was super helpful. In our case, in Santa Rosa, in Sonoma County, we had to rebuild 5,900 homes. And we did that pretty much. Some people will always be holding out forever. Getting to 90% is what you should just call rebuilt. We are there. The one thing that I'll note, though, is that we did not rebuild. Our landscape is a problem. We don't have the 0 to 5. Everywhere you go, you're like, do these people not know that we had 4 megafires in 3 years? Because we had 2 in 2019, another in 2020, and no nerve endings left, period, by the end of all of it. The thing about Paradise is, so in every fire, if you've seen a fire, you've seen one fire, and every fire's recovery is predicated upon the pre-existing conditions and how the community organizes after. In the case of Paradise, that was October 8th, 2018, and they lost, and in the Camp Fire, 18,000 homes, in Paradise, a little over 4,000 homes. They had about 27,000 people there when the fire happened, and 2,000 immediate, like the next day. That's it. So the first thing the mayor said to me when I met her 10 days into this, she said, well, I guess we qualify for USDA grants now, because they were above the threshold for that. The entire town is on septic, including the business sector, right? And it was a beautiful place, but people moved there who were under-resourced, and some people really loved it, but they had a large elderly population, and who were very under-resourced, and so those people are least likely to come back. It is true that if you talk to people in Paradise, they do appreciate that they now have views, and that's actually been really helpful in rebuilding the town, because it's beautiful views. It's up on a ridge. In case you don't know, it sits right at the top of a ridge. They have now returned to 11,000 people are home 6.5 years later, and about 30% of their housing stock is rebuilt. Couple things there. Again, all septic. Again, largely under-resourced. They do have a new young families moving in, which is actually really good for that community because they didn't have that before. They were a town, they would tell you, these are their words, that was really dying. And they wouldn't have wished the fire, but since the fire happened and they wanted to rebuild it, they're very much welcoming of all of the new people, the new businesses who want to come in, and it's affordable, and it is very beautiful. But rebuilding with all septic, even in your business district, because you have to rebuild your homes and your businesses along the same, if you have a total destruction of the town. So that's been a challenge, but I think they've done a great job. Unfortunately, people just look at the numbers. Another thing that happens is that people think, 18,000 LA, 18,000 Paradise. These must be the same. And you're like, could not be more different. In every single way, these fires are totally different. And then, what's the other fire that you mentioned? See, Camp Fire, Woolsey Fire. Woolsey doesn't...
Lahaina.
Oh, Lahaina. So Lahaina, the measure that the entire community has agreed upon is not the units of housing. The measure is, did we get our community home? And they have worked incredibly hard to really lay the foundation to not have a full-out predatory practice. And because people were cold calling on August 9th, the day after the fire happened, trying to buy people's land. It's worth a ton. And most of Lahaina was actually renters, so that's a challenge. You'll see it accelerate a lot in another 6 months or so. They're actually ahead of schedule. So they're only a year and a half out. That's it. That's as far as they are, as a year and a half out. They were cleaned up in under a year. They also did this interesting thing, which they sealed off their burn scar area. You had to have a permit in order to get there for over a year. And I had been in many times, and many people in Lahaina had never been in. So they just took a different tactic. But the holiest place in all of Lahaina is actually in the burn scar. So most of the things are being worked out. You're going to see it. You're going to see a huge. This is very normal between year 2 and year 4. You'll see the bulk of the rebuilding happen in any community. That's true.
So it's really just a matter of time, and they're getting ready. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, it's encouraging too, but it is a little scary to think about 2 years and, between 2 and 4. I mean, those are long numbers for people with small children, because when you come back, they aren't so small anymore. But, better to come back than not, I suppose. But it's tough. How do you work with local communities on the psychological aspect of all of this? Because I know that you've done workshops with church groups and synagogues and so forth, and you've talked to people about how they're managing socially. Describe that to us.
I hate that this happens to communities, but I really think that we do have the privilege of meeting people at their very best in their worst moments. We call it the worst club, best people, and often that is true. So the way that we are incredibly specific about how we enter into a community, and anyone who can't do this is not with me or is never invited back. And the key is respect the people in front of you. It is their disaster. And we're here to say, what do you need and how can we help? And then listen for the things that we know that you're going to need, and listen for them and figure out what's the right time for that piece of it to enter into the picture. I don't allow heroes or saviors. There's nothing worse than that. It's true that when you've had a big disaster like this, you do want somebody to come in and tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. But if anybody does that, they may not be right, and they may not have listened to people who lost everything. And you have to be able to listen to what people want. I am a reverse engineer. What did you love about your community? What was so special about it? What would you like back again? And then also, what's going on with you right now? The level of trauma is often directly related to what happened there. And there's a lot of trauma in your community. And an interesting thing is, like in Maui, they processed it through cultural ways because people there follow the indigenous culture. In here, the organizing seems to be the trauma response, which I want them to do, but I just want to make sure that they're not organizing over each other or forgetting to learn from each other or listen to each other. That's really important. This really great thing happened when we were there a couple weeks ago, and we are able to come back for a week, a month for the next year. But this great thing happened. Emily Kane Miller, she's just a firecracker. She stood up, and I asked her to come to the next meeting with me because we had all the Pally Strong, one Pally. I couldn't make sense of what all the groups were. So she's like, let's do this. We're going to say name and neighborhood. And that seemed to do it. And then everybody reminded themselves that they were there for their neighborhood. And it totally changed the tenor of the meeting, and it made it so much better. It wasn't about any organizations that were competing that stood up. And then we said, make sure that you have a map soon so that you can see who's being left out of this conversation. People who may be really traumatized, you don't know. So we try to be very constructive but gentle. And because we do stay for years, we spend a lot of time answering questions in this phase. And we do that for many, many years. But you won't need me as much after about another after about month 18.
You know, I think our way of coping is to make merch. You know, all the groups have the hats and the, you know, I have several different hats that I've had from different groups, and I just bought 2 flags, and, you know, we do that. We like it. We like branding. We like merch.
You do?
And look, we don't have other stuff to wear, so, you know, you might as well get the Pally
I'm
stuff.
not knocking it. I'm not.
Yeah.
I am impressed by the level of doership, though, in your fires, and it's on both sides. You guys are doers, you're creators, you're producers, you're just producing this, and I'm very much in favor of it. But I do want people to concentrate also on making sure that they aren't aren't missing the big opportunity here to really come together as a community. Because my worry is always, how do I make sure that fire survivors are heard and centered? You know, absolutely. And that's never done me wrong in 7.5 years. Like, who am I doing this for? Does it help fire survivors? Is it legal, ethical, and won't hurt my marriage? I will do it.
So maybe you can let's go back to the beginning for a second and explain us what exactly the organization does for communities like us. So you talked about like a lot of different things. Like, take us from the beginning. Like,
Sure. Right away, what we do, like in your fire, is we start answering questions from people who've just undergone the fire, and they contacted me. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, all day, and every 5 minutes I get another request in my email, and they were all worthy. They were all deserving of my attention, and so I get together with my team, and we start to figure out, like, how can we answer people's most immediate questions, but really our main function is to help leaders. We're not individual assistance organization. We will help people on occasion, but we were contacted by several companies that wanted to ask, what can we do for our employees? What might they need right now? By philanthropy, what do we need to look out for? Because even if they know big philanthropy, they haven't done this huge disaster like this before. And public sector will come to us and ask, what happened? What's around the corner? What do we need to anticipate? Questions about debris removal, Oren, you'll be very pleased. We're very common. Again, and actually a big thing in your fire is smoke damage. We've never seen this level of smoke damage, so I made sure that I brought somebody on who had specific lived experience in smoke damage. I also have an insurance expert on my team. She just came to me from United Policyholders. So we answer a lot of questions. We may disagree on this, Joel, but I believe you had a lot of misinformation. I know it. And it was really hard because it makes things more traumatizing when you're walking through it. So I felt an obligation to make sure I did every interview, like 50 of them in 3 weeks, down to like WebMD. Like, fine, I'll do them all just to make sure that people had good information.
You got the coveted WebMD interview?
Yeah, I did a WebMD interview.
Wow.
On mental health.
Well, there you go. Well, okay.
I mean,
That's real. That is real.
And so,
Yeah.
Oren, just to tell you, like, other things we do, we advocate nationally, but we only do federal advocacy. And we advocate, educate. We convene people once a year, the best leaders that I really like who they are and what they're doing and how they contribute. I bring them together in Sonoma for 3 days, and we have a wildfire leadership summit. And then we deploy, which is really the most important thing, which is to go there to your community, and I choose people who have similar fires or elements of that can be helpful to you, and then we sit with them and we figure out how to advise, and we do after-action reports.
So you're essentially an organization that assists fire-damaged communities.
Yep. We help
With
you navigate.
resources, experience. It's amazing. So let me just hit on this budget issue for a second, because you mentioned in your bio that you have helped secure $6 billion in tax dollars from the federal government for people in communities that have suffered from fires. And the numbers begin to sound strange, because I know our governor's requesting $40 billion, which is a lot. I don't know how that compares to previous fires offhand, but
That's about right. It's really a reimbursement for all the money. It's what Biden promised, though, for all the cleanup and the firefighting and all of that.
right. So, okay, I'd love to hear your process, but let me just give you some insight into where things are now. This is the newsworthy part of the thing. So, Biden guaranteed funding, because this happened in the last few weeks of his administration, I think for 6 months or a certain number of months. Right now in Congress, they're having a fight over the spending bill that the president wants to pass. There's a House Republican version. There's a Senate Republican version. Democrats don't like either of the versions. They want to negotiate a different version. And then there's a question of, well, if we can't agree on what to spend, do we then sign a continuing resolution or vote for a continuing resolution that keeps the funding just rolling over at present levels? As I understand it, as we speak tonight, we don't know what's going to happen, but basically, if there's a continuing resolution, it's going to keep the funding at its present levels for California, which on the one hand is a good thing because the funding will continue. On the other hand, we're not going to see any of the innovations that might be necessary to make sure the money gets spent on what it should be spent on. I don't know how that's going to fit into the legislation. And I actually spoke to someone fairly high up in Washington who also said they hadn't seen the text of the continuing resolution, so they don't know exactly what the spending on California is going to look like. So this is all up in the air. And if there's a government shutdown, then that's all delayed. I mean, the funding will come eventually, but so this is all a mess. And I'd be interested to know how you were able to pull $6 billion out of the mess.
Well, first of all, I'm really, really good at my job, Joel. And if you called up Senator Crapo's finance staff and asked him how that happened, they would say Jennifer was in our offices all the time. All the time. Between Maui and this bill, that was pretty much my full work product last year in particular. I like to call my style politely furious. And what we did was that I worked on this actually in the 117th Congress, and it didn't go anywhere because I wasn't there all the time. Then when it was reintroduced by our part, so there's two parts to the tax measure. It was the only tax measure that passed in last year's in Congress too. The first one was and this does pertain to you, if your fire becomes a claimant fire, meaning that if there is a lawsuit and you get a settlement, by the way, you do not need to retain an attorney, and you can do it a year from now. It'll make no difference. Do not be part of the scoop, right? Just be very mindful. They're not always ethical. Shocker. So the first thing is that people were getting their settlements, and in our case, the Fire Victims Trust, because PG&E went into bankruptcy, so they'd get the settlement for like 4 years, and they would have to claim it as personal income tax, and they would be taxed at that level. And because of the Trump tax bill in 2017, one of the offsets was they could not deduct their attorney's fees. So they were paying people, especially in Paradise, who normally don't make that much money, were living in a trailer for 4 years, 5 years, wanted to rebuild, but needed those funds, but had ginormous tax bills taken out of their settlement. And we just said, that is just wrong. That's just not fair. These people are just trying to get home. Plus, they were losing their health care, Social Security, veterans benefits that were based upon income. There was like a cascading effect of nonsense. The other side of it is that the other part is Greg Stubbe's bill out of Florida. So we got combined in HR 5863, and that just gave like a casualty tax loss for a 10%. So you'll be able to claim I'm not a tax expert, and I'm more of an expert on our side, but you'll be able to claim just a deduction for a longer period of time than you would have been able to as a rebuilder. And that just helps everyone across the board. Very bipartisan. We work very bipartisan, and I think that helps us a lot. We work with Cornyn, Cruz, Cassidy. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And most of the whipping we had to do was with the GOP, because they were in the majority in the House, and then in the Senate, it was a matter of just getting them to put it over the line, and it was agonizing. In the House, we got a discharge petition, which has only worked like 3 times in 17 years or something. A discharge petition is when you have enough signatures that you notify the Speaker that you're going to take it to a vote to the floor anyway. So Johnson wisely said...
Right, just to explain that, so the Speaker controls what bills come to the floor, except if you get a discharge petition. And this was something Republicans got excited about when they didn't like their speakers. They would try to push things onto the floor, whether the Speaker liked it or not.
Yeah.
So you got one of those done?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. telling you. Look at the respect on Joel's face. Everybody look at Joel.
That's rare.
It's true though. I take fire survivors with me too, like the mayor of Paradise and the supervisor from Plumas County, and I really do make sure we have a full representation of all the blue states are, red. I don't even care. I just care. Are you a fire survivor? Can you understand that experience? Are you a good leader? And we just went often, and I just hammered it over and over again with Crapo's office. And even when I got really frustrated with Crapo, his staff, to their credit, did an emergency meeting with me to keep the relationship. And then I worked with Wyden's team, and then when I didn't like him holding it up, then I'm a by proxy person, so I made sure that people were at his town halls to talk to him about that in Oregon. And so I was fearless, and I was like, whatever it takes, I'm going to get the relief for fire survivors. And we passed. We were in the larger tax bill 7024, but then that was dead. So we were pulled out of there, put in a discharge petition, passed on the House floor in May with only 7 no votes, and in the Senate in December on unanimous consent.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really shouldn't have had to do a discharge. They should have just done it anyway. But really, I do have a lot of respect for that. That's very hard. That's like winning a write-in election.
It's incredibly hard, and everybody likes our build. I mean, everybody understood the build. There was nobody said this is done. I mean, no, everybody got it, but still, Washington is weird, and getting them to do even the most obvious thing can be really difficult.
You know what it is also? When something feels urgent, when it's a defense spending bill or something like that everybody feels has to go through, that's when all this other stuff gets attached to it. So you might have a perfectly worthy bill, but if people feel it's really worthy, like, unanimous consent worthy, then they start wanting to attach other things to it, and that's when the consensus falls apart. That's why they can't pass ordinary things a lot of the time, because...
Or even the CR, like the clean CR, not clean CR, Christmas tree
right.
CR, clean CR. So they wanted to put us in the CR, and I was like, nope, not doing it. Everybody wanted it, all the leadership wanted it, and I'm like, nope. I don't trust that this will go through. I have no confidence in the next year. Nope. And they listened.
All right, so let me ask you about one thing then before we go back to Ron, who I know wants to say something. The one issue I've tried to explain to people that we can probably only resolve with federal funding is the insurance problem, where so many people in our community lost their insurance. That feels sort of unique to this fire. Again, I don't know enough about other fires to say that 100%, but I think the fact that some neighbors of mine lost their insurance December 18th, and some were due to lose it on January 11th. And that was because of California's policy of trying to keep the premiums low, which means that State Farm and others pulled out. Others pulled out, and they said, well, the reason is there are so many of these wildfires, and whatever reason they cited, they just started leaving the state. And so people lost their insurance, but it really was sudden for a lot of people in our community. And they've come to me and said, can we just be made whole? All we want is the coverage we paid for years and years and years, and that we lost literally 2 weeks before this disaster. And I've said to people in the federal government, is there a way to make that happen? Is there a way to make that federal funding available to people to get them back to where they were? I don't want to let the insurance companies off the hook, but they're also operating in a really difficult environment in this state. And how do we help people who don't have insurance or who were pushed onto the California Fair Plan, which people have started calling the California Unfair Plan? I mean, how do we fill that? Can that be done in federal legislation?
I'm going to say short answer, no. It can't be, because imagine, though, if you have like a $27 million home in the Palisades and you are 20 million, you have 20 million in coverage, you don't have 7. So that would be a gift of public funds, and that we cannot do. Although I'll tell you that after this fire, you can do a funding mechanism around the Palisades that engages in what's called CBCI, catastrophic based, community-based catastrophic insurance. And that means that you can take out an insurance policy for your area for $100 million. It gives you more cash to do that kind of stuff with, as you so choose after. That exists. Marsh McLennan has it. They came to me. I liked it for fire communities. You lost your insurance because in California as a whole, we have 40 million people, and it was just creeping towards you anyway, what was happening, because of all of their other losses and all of these other fires. Insurance companies are a for-profit business. They want to make a profit. They are making a profit. But what they want is, they have shareholders. So they're beholden to them, and they have to figure out how to minimize their exposure and their risk in order to maximize profits, because they have shareholders. So don't dismiss that at all, because that's a big deal. California is not a hard market to be in, because they've told me it's not a hard market to be in. It's just a risky market. Now, here's some good news. In Paradise, because they have done a really good job with the 0 to 5 and doing things that make the entire community safer, they have just seen Mercury Insurance. They invited them in. Mercury Insurance went, and they were so impressed that they picked up a large portion of Paradise and reduced their premiums way down, like 10% of what they were. We're talking like from $14,000 to $800 a year. I mean, it's very different, right? So there's a way to do this. Insurance companies want to insure you. What they don't want to do is lose billions and billions and billions of dollars. So tax credits are really the only way that you could do what you're talking about. But the gift of public funds, I'm trying to imagine what somebody in Ohio would think if we were like subsidizing people getting home.
No, I get that, and that is a problem that we face. But there are also a lot of cases of people, let's say, with a $6 million home who are covered for $2 million under California Fair, and it's a $4 million loss, and they don't have some of the other benefits, never mind the coverage. They don't have the benefits, like they don't have alternate living expenses, or they don't have things that they had on their previous policy. So life is much more uncomfortable for them now than it ought to have been. And maybe they can absorb the loss and rebuild, but it's so difficult to function when you don't have some of the amenities that you paid for, some of the other things.
I so agree too. And even for people who think they're completely covered, the language in your insurance policy, by the way, we highly recommend United Policyholders. They're a nonprofit to look at these insurance issues. They're really smart about this. I have empathy for the $27 million home, the $4 million, the $400,000 home. They all belong in our club. I don't want anybody to be left behind. It's terrible. A lot of people need an SBA loan for their second, and they make the mistake of paying off their mortgage for their first if they can, and then they don't qualify for a second. So there's just so many financial tragedies that end up happening here, and we do everything we can to help them understand how to do it. But I was cognizant right away that people who were on the FAIR plan were going to have a major shortfall, and like you said, they were just canceled. So I wouldn't mind if there was a federal law that said if you canceled within 90 days, you have a major catastrophe, then maybe that's different. But I don't know that the insurance industry would love that idea.
Can you explain me, how do you spend $40 billion? I just did the math. Like if we have 10,000 houses that got burned down and you get $40 billion, so it means that each household has like $4 million, right?
No. No. So you have.
No, I understand it not but where do you spend $40 billion if I'm not getting 4 million? You know what? Give me 2. But where do you spend $40 billion?
Yeah, I know. That would be so fun to have that job. I'd be like, Oren, you get $2 million. Joel, you get $3.5 million. It's the cost of fighting the fire too. So there's an FMAG and a FEDDEC, and an FMAG is the cost of fighting the fire. And that has to be reimbursed. And so some fires don't get a federal declaration, but they do get an FMAG to help fight the fire.
But listen, in my neighborhood, I'm paying taxes for LA County. Nobody fought the fire in my neighborhood. So what am I? If this portion, let's assume, right? We have $4 million per household. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now let's say in my neighborhood there is 400 houses. Let's take 400 times $4 million. Who is getting reimbursed for this money? Nobody put a hose out.
I hear you, but here's something to know about megafires. They're awful, but they also go football field every 3 seconds. And you can talk to any firefighters. I've traveled with a fire marshal from the city of Santa Rosa, and you can have a much better conversation with Paul Lowenthal for sure. But I live next door to the most CAL FIRE LNU. and they're the most elite firefighting.
No, don't get me
group
wrong.
that
I love the firefighters.
No, here's
I
I just want to
understand.
make you feel
I'm
better.
just, I understand.
trauma
I
of it.
saw like what they did. They were like, but I don't get $40 billion.
All of it costs. It all costs tons of money. Like this is debris cleanup, but that will still come out of your insurance. You have a line item.
So
on your
debris clean out
that's just
insurance
for
is
debris.
paying. I'm paying to like
Some, if they're insured,
99% of the people are insured, and the
they're
insure
not.
right now in our situation, almost everybody is insured for debris.
In yours, if they have a mortgage, they're insured. In the Eaton fire, when they had generational housing,
Yes.
that was their wealth that they passed on. There's a lot of no insurance.
No, I'm talking about this one because
that's
you guys
interesting.
threw $40 billion. I'm trying to understand where does this money goes.
It's for both fires, though.
Okay.
It's not for just the Palisades. It's
I think
the
this
whole
is-
cost.
This is the question I've been raising, Jennifer, with people in Washington in a slightly different way, which is whatever the number ends up becoming. I mean, maybe Gavin Newsom asked for a high number thinking he might get a lower number. I don't know. But whatever they spend, we want to make sure it's spent properly, because we have so many examples in California of things not being spent properly. And whether it's money from Republicans to Democrats or from Democrats to Democrats, I mean, there's so much disappointment. We had this audit last week of the homeless services in LA. They spent $2.3 billion and nobody knows what they spent on. They don't know what they spent on. They didn't keep records. It's just gone. And we have more homeless people instead of fewer. That might not necessarily be related, but we just can't figure it out. And then with the state cap and trade fund, that money from the cap and trade system was supposed to go to climate change resiliency, but it got raided for all kinds of other priorities. So we need to make sure that whatever is spent is actually spent on services. I mean, I think that's partly what Oren's getting to, which is that we pay taxes for municipal services, and we understand it was difficult, but we didn't really get municipal services. Even we didn't get police, I mean, directing the evacuation. So I think that's just the frustration. Yeah.
I hear you. I think it's fair to ask. I think it's fair to ask the governor's office. I actually have a meeting with them from the ops coming up, and I can say I think the people need some transparency in what the $40 million is for. Like, I know I have a good idea, but I'm not combing through it. But I think it should be combed through. I have no problem with that.
Are you going on his podcast?
Huh?
Are you going on his podcast?
No, because I'm not Charlie Kirk. So
I'm just saying, I mean, I have a very close relative who is a public school teacher, does not necessarily share the same political views I do on many subjects, but was furious that the governor was able to go on a podcast in the middle of everything else going on. It's like, what?
I won't pretend like I wasn't surprised. I had some thoughts on it. I shared them, and so that's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, well, listen, whether you talk about this on a podcast or in an office, we do appreciate it, because I think people feel like they want to know that this is working out.
Another reason why you want block captains, it gives you political, social, and economic power, but it really gives you a political powerhouse to say what it is that you're mad about, what you want, what you need. It's a very big deal.
I think it's also interesting. I mean, the whole block captain structure is interesting because it does fill a gap. I think when I was up there and police were asking me if I knew a neighbor that they were looking for who was reported missing, or I mentioned the firefighters looking for a key to a gate, there's just a level of community involvement that's absent when you just take all the people out of a situation. There's no additional level where law enforcement and emergency services can interact with anybody. And I bumped into Tracy Park, our city councilor, in the middle of the fire, and she was there, and I gave her credit for that. But, she can't be everywhere during a fire or a rebuild. So I think this block captain idea is pretty neat. And I haven't been able to attend very many of the meetings, but it does seem to be a really interesting structure.
Well, it should be driven by the people who lost their homes. That's just my take on it. Like, you should be, talking to each other and figuring out what's working and what's not working for you. It's actually a great tool for leaders like Tracy Parks too, because some leaders are afraid of it. I had the mayor of Paradise ask me if I was organizing all the anger against her. I was like, no. This is like your best tool, and she ended up loving it. But it's partnering. This, by the very nature of disaster, is it's such a huge group project. It requires everyone to make it through, and you can and you will because you're doers, and you're asking great questions. So I have these are all the reasons why I have a lot of confidence in you, even though I know it's pretty terrible right now. I understand.
Ron, do you have any thoughts before we begin to wrap up?
You took my questions about the insurance, but that was really that's the hot topic right now. A lot of folks are asking, how do we fight this good fight against the insurance companies, even people that have coverages? So I'm on all the chat rooms, and everybody has their own fight about itemization and, and coverages and how fast you get paid and what your coverages are. And it seems like a little bit of a losing battle because these companies don't even want to be here. So there's no leverage for the people that are trying to fight that fight. And my question was how do you can fight a fight when you have leverage, and when you don't, you kind of are beholden to what the other folks are going to do.
Or you organize according to who has which insurance company, and then you go to Sacramento and you testify against them. You call the media, you tell them that so-and-so is not treating you right, and all of a sudden things change. We had to do that in 2017. We had 1 year of ALE. We had all kinds of problems, but as soon as everyone who had State Farm, everyone who had, that's just naming one because they happen to be mine, everyone, if they said, hey, we need this, the contents piece alone, that should just be changed. You should not have to fight to figure out what was in your house down to the toothbrush after a major loss and a trauma. They should pay you out what you paid in your insurance policy. Period. Shouldn't even be a conversation. Here you go. Because it's the only money that is really flexible in your entire policy. And it would be the humane and right thing to do. And it's what they promised you from the get-go. And they have the ability to do it. But in the meantime, Ron, if you have people who have the same insurance, I'll tell everybody with the same insurance companies to get into a Slack or they're using Circle or whatever they're using. Or
Now we have that part.
Talking. Huh?
We have the WhatsApp groups and that sort of thing, but I think
it's the leverage that's the missing part.
Yeah,
you don't have the leverage.
No. It's
yeah.
Even in this atmosphere, you can get stuff done. I see myself as boulders, and I'm not the boulders, but I'm water, and it's all boulders, and I'm going in between the water, and all I think about is it right? Is it what you deserve as a fire survivor? Yes, and then you go for it, and you don't ask for permission to lead. You just get out there and you tell them what it is that you need and want and what's decent and kind.
Wow. Well, that's such a great note to end on tonight. And Jennifer Gray Thompson from After the Fire, we are really glad that you were able to join us. Tell us before we go how we can stay involved, how we can find out more, how people can donate if they want to donate, all the social media sites, everything.
Sure. We're on Facebook, which I know Facebook isn't cool, but if you want to reach all the people, especially older people, Facebook. After the Fire USA, we're on YouTube. We actually have 3 years of our summit on there too, and 100 poorly produced episodes of my podcast called How to Disaster. And that's on. So After the Fire USA, you have to put that in there, or you get the German band. We are not on Twitter. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And we are on Instagram too, After the Fire USA. And our website is afterthefireusa.org. Donate locally. We actually have gotten some private funds, and so I'm just going to ask you to donate locally to a local school or a daycare you want to open or something like that. I like California Community Fund, but find something in your neighborhood that you care about and donate there. We're good for this year. We are funded enough to keep coming back for the once a month. So stay involved by following us, and then reach out and then have me back, Joel. I'd be very, very happy to come back on the podcast and talk to you guys at that time. Or if you want someone calmer, I can give you somebody calmer.
All right. Well, Jennifer Gray Thompson has been our guest on Three Homeless Guys. You can find us at threehomelessguys.com and email us for suggestions or questions, pod@threehomelessguys.com. Thanks so much. Stay safe until next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Three Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out 3homelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@3homelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.